All right, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with, you got pretty excited about Jalen, is it Richard?
I did, only because
Does he get demoted to Jalen Dick after?
Jalen Richard, at least. He's being a huge Richard on Twitter about vaccines. Apparently, he
did the research.
He did the research.
That's what I found so enlightening, was a lot of people go on Twitter and they haven't done the research.
Oh.
But he had,
Yeah.
and that's always nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that I know that don't vaccinate their kids, and they're the most maddening people of all time.
It's really impressive.
And, after, one of the things I studied when I was a professor was epidemiology, and it's pretty freaking clear how herd immunity works. People who seemed too enlightened. Jalen Richard was basically like, well, what did we do before we had vaccines? And it's like, well, we died quicker.
Well, right. He asked about all of the countries that don't vaccinate their children.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why he doesn't live there. I'm sure they must be nicer places. Why did he come out over to this sick country?
Yeah, I mean,
the best part was the comments, because the comments got just as heated,
Dude.
and you had people with 5-tweet comment threads about their own experience. That's what is also really interesting, is I think every single person that is anti-vaccine has had an experience close to them, which they have somehow attributed, to a vaccine. Mm-hmm. And it really speaks to something that we deal with in football all the time on the field, which is, I just saw this thing happen, therefore it's a global rule that applies to everything.
Or I saw two things happen at the same time, and so the one caused the other.
Right. That's the other.
It's ridiculous. But, and not to make light of, honestly, there is a small chance that you will have a vaccine injury, but it's orders of magnitude less frequent and orders of magnitude less lethal, right, than us having measles again. We're an R squared of 18, or an R zero of 18.
But that's, in all honesty, that is just the way that we have evolved, right? Is to sort of be more risk averse when the risk is caused by something that man has made, theoretically, more so in our minds, than something that is, quote, natural.
Yeah.
That's just the way people always are.
We don't want self-driving cars, because what if the first self-driving car kills somebody? It's like, well, you're still going to have a smaller rate of deaths than us idiots driving cars and things like that. So,
look, what if the car gets drunk?
What if the car gets drunk? That's true.
I'd hate to see it. The other bit of news that came out today, which I didn't even know because I didn't go on Twitter recently enough, is that Melvin Gordon is holding out. And this works nicely into the game that we watched, because
when he didn't play, the Chargers, by extension, had no chance to win the game.
Well, it was interesting listening to the game. Al Michaels, the legend, the GOAT, was mentioning how, look, the Chargers have not been able to run the ball really to save their lives. And they weren't. They were really struggling to run the ball. But what was interesting was that they were passing the ball just fine.
Yeah.
And the pass actually opened up the run for them in the second half. They were having no trouble exposing Steeler linebackers, Steeler DBs. And really what just kept happening is they were either throwing away points by not going for it on 4th and 1 at the 31, which was comical on that early, was it their opening drive, I think? And then they missed the field goal. Or they were just, basically just cannibalizing points left and right by allowing things, to sort of happen that shouldn't have happened.
The Steelers gave them plenty of opportunities the first half to not be down by 16, and yet at the same time they were. Interestingly, so we're going to talk about the Chargers as a whole later, but one thing that was interesting last season, Melvin Gordon didn't play in 4 regular season games. The Chargers in those games were 3rd in EPA per passing play, 9th in EPA per rushing play. They were 4th and 7th overall with him, right, in the 12 games. So they didn't get any worse offensively as a part of Melvin Gordon not playing. So
I just remembered the other thing that I was trying to get out of my mouth, which was they failed to run the ball and then had a punt blocked. Right.
That's right.
So all these things that are like, well, look, yes, they are failing to run the ball well, but the reason that they're getting their butts kicked is actually because they're not going for it on a 4th and 1 in a no-brainer, you gain like 6 percentage points of win probability situation. And then you get a punt block, which is not Austin Eckler's fault.
Yeah.
And then because they were gouging with the pass game, generational talent Justin Jackson came in and made some real nice things happen, right? He was breaking some tackles and running through, the open lanes because the Steelers were respecting the pass.
The Chargers are really our Tampa Bay of 17. Last year, we were 1-5 picking their games, including this game. We had Pittsburgh -3, which looked really good at halftime when they were up 16. But if you actually look at what was happening, first drive of the game, Rivers hits Keenan Allen 3 times on that drive. And the only reason that drive is not extended and it's not getting points is that third time was on a 3rd and 11, and it's only for 10 yards. And Badgley misses a 52-yard field goal. The Pittsburgh Steelers come right back. Antonio Brown catches a 46-yard pass over the top of Casey Hayward, who, an interesting anecdote, Casey Hayward, brilliant in 2017 by our grades, good last season, but not nearly as good as the season ago where he was worth about a win. Last season he was worth about a third of a win. And then they go James Conner up the middle. James Conner replacing, of course, the irreplaceable Le'Veon Bell, and scored 2 touchdowns in this game.
Okay, so I wanted to start with this question about this game on a macro level. You watch this game and you think about the Steelers. Does this game make you more bullish about their value this season or less so?
Well, so on one hand, Ben didn't play that great, right? He missed some open throws. He had Justin Hunter on a corner when no one's around him. He misses him by about a foot. He threw a couple like screen pass. I remember one to Vance McDonald on a long 3rd down. He made him like go to the floor for it. He missed some throws on like bubble screens and stuff. Big Ben was not sharp in this game or all of last season. And yet because the Steelers had Antonio Brown, they made their fair share of big plays, including on the first drive, but then on their second drive, they were able to get Davis for a pass interference penalty and get into Steelers, into Chargers territory and get Conner a second touchdown to put them up 13-0 after a missed extra point. Brown's gone, right? So we're really relying on Juju Smith-Schuster. We're relying, on the tight ends like Vance McDonald, and we're relying on James Conner to make those plays. Antonio Brown can be huge. James Washington's going to have to step in and play well for them in order for that to sort of work.
I, at first, thought, this makes me bullish about the Steelers because this was a super fluky game, and they have that false start penalty. They seemingly should have scored on every single drive. That play that you mentioned where they were going to score to start the second half, and then there's a holding penalty. And then I thought about some of the other pieces that were really obvious in this game, which was Ben Roethlisberger was not touched, really, by one of the better pass rush teams in the NFL, which I think is interesting to talk about from the Chargers' perspective because that then happened in New England in the playoffs. But, Mike Munchak is was a great offensive line coach.
He goes to Denver. You wonder,
does that go away? Big Ben is certainly not a guy who you want in anything but a clean pocket. And Antonio Brown was a lethal weapon in this game. He really showed, I think, a lot of the reason why he's been the best receiver over the past 5 years, kind of, torch Casey Hayward a couple of times. And both those guys are gone. Yep. So I think still on balance, because of how much they've been devalued, I'm still bullish on them. But I kind of came around. At first, I was like, this is a reason to be optimistic. And then I kind of pulled myself back.
Yeah, as somebody that owns basically even money for the Steelers to make the playoffs, right? I think that's still a good value. As somebody plus 170 to win the AFC North, I still think they're undervalued on the marketplace, but absolutely. I mean, so we saw, one of the reasons I think this game was a bad beat from our end was the Chargers' first touchdown was a deep pass to Travis Benjamin. The right tackle was offsides by a mile, and they don't call it. And that was a repeated situation in this game. But then the Steelers come right back. They get a nice drive. And as we said, Big Ben makes a terrible decision, floats the ball up for Vance McDonald, gets picked off by our guy Derwin James, run back a little bit here. And again, like you're thinking, okay, are the wheels going to come off the Steelers here? Much like their entire season last year, right? Start out a little bit, start out okay, but like kind of teetering a little bit, and then they rebound here a little bit. They rebound basically by forcing the Chargers to punt. They come back and they come back and get the score to 23-7 by the time the halftime rolls around.
Well, that was the second thing that I wrote in my notes, was this game culminated that entire Steelers season last year. There was so much to be excited about to begin the season.
Yep.
They then come out and just sort of not completely poop the bed, but like they just don't give you they don't tie everything together in the way that a team with that much talent should. And then they fight back a little bit and then ultimately just like can't get it done because they just can't pull enough things together. They have Antonio Brown at the end of the season, like just leave and all these things. So it really seemed like this game was a microcosm.
They start out 7-2. They finished 9-6, but their last 4 losses were all by a touchdown or less. So very much like this game, it wasn't by much, but they fell apart. And so, I mean, and granted, the Chargers, you could make the argument in the first half got some bad beats as well. You had this, you had the pass interference penalty on Davis, right? Mm-hmm. That led to the 28-yard touchdown by Brown to end the half. But God, when we were watching this game live, so to start the second half, the Steelers drove the ball, and basically, they got to, the midfield or so. They punt the ball. The next Chargers drive takes basically the balance of the quarter. And there are a couple plays. There's, I believe, a hold that backs the Chargers up, and then they have to complete a long pass to Mike Williams on a third down, and then another pass to Mike Williams, and then there's the touchdown to Keenan Allen where 2 Steelers run into each other trying to intercept the ball. It flops up in the air, caught by Keenan Allen, 2-point conversion. Now the Chargers are in business. Yes.
It was a rough game to rewatch, certainly because of the fact that the Steelers got off to such a nice run. I wrote, it was doubly hard for me because then there's the Derwin James factor. You know how much I wanted the Niners to take Derwin James in that draft, was jumping up and down when he fell to them. And then, look, I love Mr. McGlinchey, Grandpa Mike. But Derwin James in this game was incredible.
Unreal.
I just wrote "Holy Derwin" 3 different times, and they were plays that were just enormous. I mean, the guy in coverage, the guy off the end, he is so good. Allowed a pass rating of under 40 when targeted against tight ends last year, and that's something that's really valuable. I don't think enough is made of the value. So I think enough is made of the value of tight ends now. Gronk has done a pretty good job.
The scarcity, too, because the guys that are good are awesome, and then the guys that suck are like Jesse James, right?
Are really bad. But what gets left out in that conversation is how valuable it is to have someone that can cover tight ends. Patrick Chung, you talk about him all the time, and Derwin James is that not only can he cover tight ends, but you could also stick him out, on a big slot or something like that.
Harrison Smith is another one. I mean, the teams that have these really breakneck offenses generally will have a tight end that can break your back. Kansas City, one of them. Obviously the Patriots with Gronk. The way in which Shanahan uses his tight ends with George Kittle, like it is a cheat code. And so if you have and can you imagine how difficult it is to cover a tight end? I mean, you have to be big enough to cover somebody that's 250 pounds. You have to be fast enough to cover a guy who's good enough to play in the slot. And you also are in the middle of the field, so the receiver has a two-way go almost all the time, which is unlike playing on the boundary. Mm-hmm. So it is a hard task, and generally speaking, teams are throwing the tight ends in efficiency situations like first and second down. So, the fact that Derwin James is so good at it is really a testament to how truly elite he is as a player.
I really couldn't agree more.
Desmond King runs back a punt. I thought, when Desmond King ran back that punt, this was literally the Steelers' drive in a nutshell. So they get the ball at the end of the third quarter with about 1:38 left. Passed a couple passes to Antonio Brown, get a first down. So they're at the 30. They run on first down for a yard, right? Mm-hmm. They get called for offensive holding after an 8-yard run by Connor, right? second down, holding on second down is literally the worst thing that you can do except for a sack on second down. And then on second and 19, Roethlisberger gets sacked. So now you're at 3rd and 29, and then as I said before, they tried to run a screen to Vance McDonald, and Big Ben throws it at the guy's ankles, and he's only able to get like 5 yards. They get a punt. Jordan Berry punts it out of, outkicks his coverage, and Desmond King runs it back. Desmond King, one of the players we've really liked out of Iowa, not only as a really elite slot corner, but also a return man. And so that ties the game up right then and there.
I want to save the rest of my Chargers questions for the Chargers section, but this left me with a bunch of questions about the Chargers as well. But to put a cap on it, Melvin Gordon holding out. Should anyone in the Chargers organization be terrified by that?
Well, given that in this particular game, Justin Jackson and Jalen Samuels score the last 2 touchdowns, sort of tells you all you need to know. If you're so it's strange. If you're an elite offense, I think running backs less than matter. I think, frankly, if you have a running back like Adrian Peterson in his prime, if you have a running back, even some of the great ones that we've seen, Sean Alexander, like all those guys, and you're an elite offense, you're slowing yourself down to give him the ball more, right? I mean, and so I think for offenses like the Chargers, offenses like the Steelers, like you really just need that running back that's willing to do whatever, right? Pass protect, catch the ball. If a game warrants 10 carries instead of 20, like there was always that issue with Peterson when he played for the Saints. He's on the sideline really irritated. Offense is humming. He's mad. He's not getting carries. That's sort of the incongruence there. Yeah. And then if you're a middling offense, like I think having an elite level running back, much like Seattle and the Dallas Cowboys, it sort of lulls you into a false sense of accomplishment, because by variance or whatever you'll get ahead in a game, and then you run with the guy and you feel good about yourself. And so for the Chargers, like what are the 2 outcomes that could happen this year? They can be an elite offense, in which case I don't think they need Gordon, or Phillip Rivers can regress a little bit, in which case Gordon might buoy that offense, but in some sense, if Rivers regresses a little bit and they buoy themselves to 9-7, 10-6, much like Seattle, they might convince themselves that they're ready to go at it again next year and not make the requisite changes, whether it be drafting a quarterback or revamping the offense or whatever. So
that is a scalding hot take. That good offenses, that running backs matter less. I don't disagree with it. The one thing I'll push back on is this. I think your Adrian Peterson example is spot on, but that's because Adrian Peterson doesn't do the thing that's most valuable in the NFL today. So the nice thing, now it doesn't matter that much because you can find guys that can do this anywhere by and large, but a guy that Melvin Gordon at least can catch the ball and do things with it. So you're going to be able to get him involved automatically by him being a third option on passing plays. And I think that is at least valuable relative to all the other things that a running back can do. So I will point that out, but I don't think anyone should be losing sleep. Melvin Gordon does seem like a very cool guy, though. His
from Kenosha, Wisconsin.
The video of him in the Uber, I forget where, was it at the Pro Bowl or something, or before the playoff game?
I don't know.
You didn't see this?
No.
So it was like this guy, and he was, was it in New England? I can't remember where it was, but he gets in this Uber and he's like he's like talking about the game, and the guy doesn't know it's Melvin Gordon. And I think the guy says,
oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And
it's
maybe it was
funny.
Baltimore, and they said, like, you guys have no chance. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're right, type of thing. No, he does. Honestly, I have nothing against him as a person. And frankly, like the team,
I just always feel like it's necessary to point that out.
Yeah, for sure. It's not his fault he's running back.
Before we go to the Chargers as a whole, did you watch the ESPYs last night?
I didn't, no.
Okay, there were a couple of football
I did know that Breanna Stewart won the Female Athlete of the Year because
me,
big WNBA fan.
I watched a few moments of it, and I had a couple of notes that I took down. The first is that I think Saquon Barkley was the most mentioned football player, and it wasn't even close. I don't think I heard Baker Mayfield's name once. But Saquon, very beloved. Now, nothing wrong with that. I just think it tells you a lot about why a guy like him can win, Offensive Rookie of the Year, get all this hype for the number 2 pick. And he's a great player, obviously. But people don't have a good sense of what generates value in the NFL, which I think is interesting. The second note I had was Odell Beckham wore it looked like a UPS outfit. But he did cut his hair.
Oh, nice.
And I think that's a good sign for the Browns. I think that shows a new start for Odell, and he's going to wash the slate clean. The pouch also that he had on his
So is he like a kangaroo?
Basically looked like a kangaroo suit, but the pouch was empty, which, again, reading the tea leaves, he's bringing no baggage with him to Cleveland.
Traveling light.
That's a good sign. I actually thought the outfit was kind of cool looking.
Well, and I think everybody focusing on Barkley and not Mayfield is good news for the Browns, frankly.
I mean, I do agree.
I hope that for Mahomes, Mayfield, Watson, all those folks, we don't get our expectations too high, because I think that if they, because it's going to be tough when all those, the Roethlisbergers and the Rivers from this game, for example, when they retire, it's going to be all on their shoulders, and hopefully they'll be up for it.
Second to last note, your boy, Pat Mahomes, really well spoken on TV, did an excellent job, said all the right things, just sounded like he was in a really good place. That was cool, and had some great looking shoes. So that's always good to know. But my biggest takeaway is this sort of realization that I came to, which is I think that Drew Brees has risen above expectation for what he is as a person more than any other athlete. So you might say Tom Brady. Tom Brady's 6'5" and great looking. So I don't want you to tell me that, it's such an amazing feat that he became an NFL quarterback and married a supermodel.
Yep.
Drew Brees is 6'1", had a broken back, has
kind of a dad bod, and
has a huge scar on his face, which I actually think kind of looks cool. Has a beautiful family, is going to be a record holder in every passing statistic.
Yep.
Plays for the New Orleans Saints, is the New Orleans Saints, has a Super Bowl.
Throw some shade at Bobby Hebert, but yeah.
And has played in the NFL for what will be 20 seasons.
And the thing
has made a ton of money.
Yeah, and he didn't start. He was a second-round pick.
Yep.
He got benched for Doug Flutie in his third year. We're not talking about somebody that has propped up in any way. He earned it, right? They drafted Phillip Rivers.
Yeah. So my question to you is my statement that no one has done it better than Drew Brees has. Can you give me someone that rivals what he's accomplished? And I'm not just talking about on the field. I'm talking about as a total package.
Well, it has to be a quarterback, right? Because the value.
You can give me any sport.
Zach Ertz's wife won the World Cup, but that's kind of
we're on different stratospheres.
Well, here. I can't think of one, because honestly, I don't have the off the field exploits in my
it was so cool to see. He had it was what when people hashtag goals on a post or something, that's actually what they meant. I'm curious to see if anyone can throw out someone that has done it better than Drew Brees. All right, Chargers, you ready to do this?
Yep. So the Chargers went 12-4 last year. We had them at 8.55, but their over-under was 8. So, we didn't recommend anything, but we were sort of on the right side of the number there. They were 6-3 in games decided by more than one score, 6-1 in close games, meaning that their record was probably more 10-6, 9.5, and 6.5, right?
That's basically what everyone's record is, if you're a good team.
Well, except for Kansas City, right? Because Kansas City was 8-0 in close games.
Sure.
And we had a hell of a time picking their games last year. We had their over against Oakland. We had them
rough
at London, and where they were covering, and then they gave up a touchdown the last moment. Obviously, this Pittsburgh game, we faded them. We had the over against the Bengals, which was, I think, a 2-point conversion away. And then Christmas weekend we had them against Baltimore at home and they lost, and then finally we got them with Baltimore on the road in the playoffs. So we were 1-5. Picking Chargers games. I mean, this is one of the more impressive teams in football. I gotta say that, you know, what's probably going to keep them from, you know, achieving what they want to achieve, you know, their first AFC West title since 2009, it would be, is probably going to be their coaching. Because if you look at their most valuable players, they check every box. You got Rivers, Keenan Allen's about a win, Derwin James about 3/4 of a win, Mike Williams, same thing, Desmond King, and then Casey Hayward. So they're good at the stuff you got to be good at, right? You got 3 secondary players that are all worth half a win. And their least valuable players are players that don't really matter much for them, right? Their backup quarterback a season ago struggled whenever he got in. And then it's a guard, a linebacker, just, you know, not their roster's pretty impressive, and they only got better in the draft, right? When you look at what they got in the draft, Jerry Tillery, a nose tackle from Notre Dame.
Yep.
Somebody our guy draft. Mike Renner really likes. Nasir Adderley was thought of.
Well, in fairness, Mike is a Notre Dame guy.
Yes.
So.
Nasir Adderley was thought of. They got him at 60. Many thought he was going to go in the first 30 picks, right? Yep. So they got him at 60 to sort of pair with Derwin James. They even got Easton Stick, was sort of this athletic, you know, quarterback in the back half. And then they got Trey Pipkins, sort of a backup, you know, from a small school sort of tackle prospect type of thing. So, you know, I think you know they're in a pretty good place. And an interesting kicker here. We know how when they played the Ravens in the playoffs and then the Patriots, which this kind of hurt them, they played a lot of defensive backs.
Yep.
I think a lot of that was personnel driven. So they go out and get Thomas Davis, the veteran linebacker from Carolina. He's worth about 1/3 of a win. I think he helps come in and give them athleticism at that position so they don't have to do as many sub packages. Maybe they're not as weak against teams that will go heavy against them.
Drew Tranquill, a cool pick, a guy that, you know, can get out there and play kind of the modern linebacker hybrid role, which I think will be cool. My thinking back on last season for them, that demolishing at the hands of the Patriots was so emblematic of how the Chargers' history has been. You know, these flashes in the pan which can never materialize. And what was so weird in that game was they come in with this great defense. They have this great pass rush. They have these great coverage players. Tom Brady averages 2.1 seconds and is just throwing to guys left and right. And
Joey Bosa complaining that he's whipping Trent Brown, but he's not getting he's not getting to Brady every time.
Coverage matters, but it's not enough to have guys that can just cover. You've got to be able to implement a scheme. You know, that's why I think the loss of Fangio, you mentioned this, I thought this was a great way of putting it. The defensive coordinator can potentially be the most valuable defensive player, you know, a member of that defensive personnel. So the coaching component of this, I think, is very interesting. And it's going to come down to, as you know, your Chiefs and the Chargers to win this division. And I'm curious, how many positions are the Chargers worse than the Chiefs?
Right tackle.
How many positions
left tackle
really matter that much?
Quarterback. I think it's like 3 positions. Well, I guess Tyreek Hill and Keenan Allen are about similarly good. And you're not going to get Tyreek Hill for all 16 games in all likelihood. Number 2 receiver, I think Watkins is better than their number 2 now that Tyrell Williams is gone.
You don't like Mike Williams?
Yeah, I don't think he's as good as but no, I mean defensively it's not even close, right? Yeah. Tyrann Mathieu is probably better than Nasir Adderley.
What if you
I mean, it's not that many. It's like 5 to 6.
To me, it's really about...
And it's head coach.
I thought, well, you crushed my point there, because I was going to say, I think they're better at everything except for tight end, the offensive line as a whole, and then quarterback is close. So I actually think quarterback, you can sort of say, look, Pat Mahomes is probably going to be better, but... There's enough variance in Pat Mahomes' game. He's only been there for a year. It can basically be close to a toss-up. So where's the real separation for these teams come? It comes on the offensive line, which is huge for a guy like Phillip Rivers, who isn't moving anywhere, right? You've got to just give him 2.5 seconds to get the ball out. and then coach. And we saw a great example of this in that Steelers game. 4th and 1, 34, costs you about 4 percentage points of win probability to kick the field goal. You kick the field goal, and that was emblematic of their whole season. They lost almost 17 points on 4th down decisions. It was a disaster. Them and the Rams actually were in the bottom 7 in terms of making the right decision on 4th downs, which is a bummer because of how good their team was. And they did some good things other than that. I mean, they didn't run the ball, even with Melvin Gordon. They didn't run the ball too much on 2nd and long.
They threw a lot to him and Eckler on early downs, as our friend Warren said on Twitter today.
Yep, our buddy Warren. By the way, I looked this up. So drives that had 1 or more 2nd and long run, and I only looked at drives that had a 2nd and long as a part of it. So if you didn't ever run on a 2nd and long, you averaged 1.9 points per drive. If you had a 2nd and long, at least one, and you ran at least one of those, 1.7 points per drive. Pretty big difference. 0.2 yards per play, nearly a 0.6 difference. And the best part about this was your play action yards per play, also worse when you run it on 2nd and long. So you're not establishing the play action.
You're wasting one of the best play action downs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And your touchdown percentage on those drives drops from 21 to 18%. But that's not something they did poorly on. It really comes down to, in my opinion, the defense being schematically taking advantage of all of their players and then offensively pressing their advantage.
They're another example, like they were 7th against the pass in terms of EPA, 28th against the run. So they're an example. We saw last season, I think it was like 3 of the 4 teams in the title games were like terrible in yards per carry allowed, and then the Saints were like the best. The Chargers, one of these teams right on the doorstep, was also bad against the run. It did get them against the Patriots, but everything got them against the Patriots. The Patriots passed on them. The Patriots ran on them. The Patriots stopped them. It
was just
it's a
absolute
disaster.
Destruction.
So,
what is your Phillip Rivers had his best season in a while last year
since at least 2013.
At least since 2013. I mean, by PFF grade, it was better than 2013. Commensurate with 2010.
Yeah, 2010 he was amazing. Yep.
Where he was amazing. He had a 115 passer rating when clean. By the way, he's had a 100 or better passer rating when clean every year since.
Right, and one thing we haven't discussed is that the Chargers' offensive line was terrible a season ago. It didn't really matter in terms of team success as they won 12 games. But there always is this thing where Rivers, when he gets under pressure, tends to, like many quarterbacks,
his turnover-worthy play rate dramatically increases. And this was going to be the point I was going to make, is that Phillip Rivers is still clearly good enough to get you to a Super Bowl. But he was under pressure almost 36% of the time. He's been under pressure 37.4 and 40% over the past couple of seasons. You've got to and he throws the ball very quickly. So that tells you something as well. They've got to figure out a way to manufacture more clean pockets. You can't have a guy like Phillip Rivers. Big Ben is a great example of this. Big Ben is under pressure like 24% of the time, which allows him to really press his numbers, right? Because he gets more clean pockets. If you can do the same for Phillip Rivers, I think that's the key for this Chargers team. And look, the Chiefs, things in the NFL are so high variance. The Chiefs it's not a foregone conclusion, right? The Tyreek Hill thing is a real question mark. The defense being able to cover anybody. And quite frankly, as wonderful as Pat Mahomes is, regression is a real thing.
Yep.
And all of a sudden the door could be open for a team like the
only thing
Chargers.
that the Chiefs have that I would say would abate regression at all is the fact that Andy Reid has demonstrated that he can get better every year, right? He's not the same one-trick pony. That being said, the only thing keeping the Chargers out of the discussion for AFC supremacy, if you look at the top 3 teams in terms of Vegas odds to make the Super Bowl out of the AFC, it's New England, it's Kansas City, it's Indianapolis. And the only reason that Kansas City is handicapped higher than the Chargers is the quarterback-coach combination. If the Chargers had a better, in my opinion, if they had a better structure, they would be in that top 3.
Well, quite literally structure in that if they had a home field.
Yeah, well,
I think that would help a lot, right? Too.
Because they were 7-1 on the road last year in the regular season, and then another 1-1 in the playoffs. Like, they're a great team, right? They had all the makings of a great team last year. They won on the road. They passed the ball well. They played good pass defense. They had this interesting thing too, where their pace was really like slow. They didn't run. I mean, one of the things that we learned this the hard way a couple times. We bet some overs with them because they were efficient, but we did not realize that their penchant for slowing the game down was so immense that they did so when they were ahead, and they were ahead, mightily in this Oakland game specifically. So they're a great team. The question then becomes, how stable is the greatness, right? Because you look at their over-under going into the season, it's 9.5. To bet the over, you're going to have to lay 160.
Yeah.
Okay. We have it more like 44% chance to go over 9.5, so 10 wins or more. About 56% to go 9 wins or under. So you have to like the under here if you're going strictly by the numbers. Why are the numbers saying these things?
Well, if you're going to say, hey, they're going to win 10 or more games, you're also saying, okay, the Raiders are going to really suck again. The Broncos are going to really suck again. And the Chiefs aren't going to be quite as as great. And a game like this Steelers game, you're still going to get this great variance, right? Those things are likely going to regress a little bit. So I think this is one of those where you go, oh, there's no way they don't win 10 games. But it actually is going to take – last season was real anomalous, right? To have two teams do so well in one division is so hard. So I actually think that's a bet that I kind of like. And I think you can still like the Chargers and think that there's a decent chance that they go under 9.5 wins.
Well, I mean, 2017, they're almost as good of a football team. They just go 9-7. Yeah. I mean, and this is the same thing with the Bears. It's the same thing with the Eagles last season, right? The Eagles last season, roster-wise, great. What do they have? They have injuries. They have luck on Dallas' side, and they go 9-7. And you're still getting money for betting the under there. Same thing for, we just talked about the Pittsburgh Steelers. The same thing. Like, I think the market loves betting unders for teams that they don't like, the Jacksonvilles, the Carolinas, all that kind of stuff. And they shy away from betting, Minnesota under 10, Pittsburgh under 10.5, 11, New England under 11, right? If you would have bet New England's under last year, you would have cashed because it was 11.5. And those things, again, it's just how difficult it is to win double-digit games in the NFL, especially in an AFC that's strong, starting with their first game, which is a pseudo-home game here against Indianapolis. Right. Where they're favored by 3, basically the home field advantage for a regular site. Total on this game, 47.5.
Well, before we move on to week 1 stuff, I want to make one point, which is I think for teams where you could see them going to the Super Bowl, it's hard to take the under.
Yeah.
And there's
a la the Rams last year.
But it's not incongruous, right? So if they do have a good season, they have the makings of a team that could actually go far, right? Mm-hmm. Unlike, say, what's a good example of this? A team with a bad quarterback, the Jaguars or, pray for me, the Bears. But what you're really doing is...
I almost said Carolina, but...
But you're just playing the percentages, right? The expected value on that bet is in your favor if you take the under. They could still have a better chance than other teams if they make it into the tournament to win the Super Bowl relative to the other teams that might go 10-6 or something, or 9-7 and make the playoffs. So I think that's worth considering. But let's talk about some week 1 games here. We are going to start previewing those week 1 games. You can go check out those videos on YouTube. You can hate on the attire that we wear. Mm-hmm. I was lit up for wearing a shirt that apparently
showed too much
skin. A lot of, it's 2019, but apparently I can't, try and be comfortable in here. It's like 85 degrees.
Yeah, so far we have one on Tennessee versus Cleveland. Also, Bears-Packers is up. Yep. I'll have to look and see.
Giants-Cowboys, I believe,
Giants-Cowboys is also
morning, or is it up already? Anyways, you can go check those out.
Yep.
Fire some questions. Let's do, let's have a quick conversation now about Indy at the Chargers, which in week 1 might be honestly like there's a couple of good games, but this might be the best one. Chargers at home, favored by 3. If you had to make an argument for the Chargers here, what is it?
I think the Indianapolis defense got by on a lot of gumption last year, a lot of coaching, a lot of things that I don't know are stable. Mm-hmm. So and Indianapolis, to their credit, got a new corner in Rock Ya-Sin in the draft. A great thing. Chris Ballard sort of took our he went and did Football Morning America for Peter King this week, like we did a couple weeks ago. I thought he did a great job talking about that pick. But that being said, they're not a hugely talented defense, and so early in the season, I think offense is probably more ahead of defense as we saw last year. So the Chargers could go ahead and just outrun Indianapolis, and then Indianapolis's offense, slow start a season ago. They get. What do they like to do a lot to get edges? They like to throw deep to T.Y. Hilton. They like to throw to the tight end. We already talked about Derwin James. I think the Chargers do match up well here. So that would be the case I would make for the Chargers. It's hard to lay that many points though when there are two good teams.
It is tough, and one of the things that I will bring up here is I think the home field advantage gets better for the Chargers this year because they were good last year. And I think that's something that we saw with the Rams that is talked about a lot with the Rams, but I think is being underplayed for the Chargers. So that's something that I would think of this as literally being a neutral site game. However, Andrew Luck is, I think, a better quarterback than Phillip Rivers is this coming season. And the shellacking that the Chargers got in the playoffs sort of feels like it's being chalked up to just being in New England. The shellacking that the Colts took is just like, maybe the Colts just aren't ready for this stage. I think the Colts are ready for this stage. And in a game where, look, you really don't know if there's a home field advantage. I think there will be, but to be honest, you really don't know. And the better quarterback is getting points, and everything else is sort of, kind of equal. The kicker for me is that I think Frank Reich will make enough decisions that are in his favor that it'll give them a chance to win this game. And
the only home field advantage that the Chargers have is that they'll probably wear white uniforms, and it's going to be hot.
They're going to wear the powder blues.
And Indianapolis is going to wear the dark blues, and that's going to – but they did the same thing to Kansas City in week 1, and Kansas City rolled them. So the thing – we don't really have a lean here on the spread as of now. I do think that 47.5 is a little short, much like when the Chargers played the Chiefs last year in week 1. What you're talking about is a good quarterback, great coach coming into LAC. Over total for that game was like about 48. Yeah. Sales over. I think this one, if you're gonna want to make a week 1 bet right now, I think you bet the over here, and hopefully in your case it might go up over a key number and you could bet underneath later. But I like the over here right now.
Well, I hate the under.
Yeah,
but I hate every under. All right, let's do a couple of quick things to get out of here with. So. Stories from the Cincinnati Y. I actually have a story that is not related to the Y, but related to a sort of public place that gets kind of a lot of attention, which is airplanes. Oof. But I want to hold that for the end, and I have something Cincy Y.
I have airplane stories if you want them too.
Well, I figured. So with regard to the Cincy Y, though, we were playing some basketball today, and both of us have pretty unique pickup basketball games. And it got me thinking, what is the worst kind of guy to play basketball with in a pickup game? And then what's the worst kind of guy to play against?
I think with is, God, that's hard. When I played hoops in high school, the worst player to play with was a drive to the basket every time he gets the ball guy. Because every once in a while, I mean, he'll shoot it all the time.
Yeah.
But the other thing is his passes. I played with this guy in high school named Yormi Quiwampa. That was his name.
That's a good name.
And I was post, and he threw, and his passes into the post were about as bad as. So, like, I would always get crap from my coach for having bad hands. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, Yormi's the one who can't throw me the ball very well. And then I think Yormi quit or something. And then the next 2 games, they scored like 25 and 25. And the next 2, I'm like, it's because I'm getting good passes now. So I think the guy that drives to the hoop and thinks he's being a good teammate by like throwing the ball as hard as he can 2 feet away from you is the worst player to play with. The worst player to play against is, I mean, anybody that's just overly physical. It's just, and it might be just because I'm old and maybe a little soft now.
You're trying to throw some shade.
But like just,
where would you rank my physicality?
You're strong, so I don't think it's less to do with your baseline physicality and more just to do with your strength. But somebody who just is a hack, like you don't hack, but you do like. Well, I take beat the hell out of somebody that goes into the block.
Here's the thing: I take it so you're a big guy, so you should be pressing your luck by posting people up. Mm-hmm. So, but when you post me up, I take it personally. Like I'm not gonna. So I try to stand my ground, right? Which I think is what you should.
Luckily,
do.
I have a mean turnaround jumper, so it is.
Okay, here's my answer to this question. Worst kind of guy to play basketball with is, now it can't just be, you can't just say guy who's bad at basketball. It's got to be like a guy that's somewhat valuable, but so it's the guy that all he does is spot up, but isn't actually very good at shooting threes. So he thinks he's spacing the floor, but can't make a shot, and then because all he does is spot up on offense, on defense he's like Mr. Hustle, but that just puts him out of position on everything. Yeah. That's the worst guy to play with.
Mr. Hustle that's like that far out of the play when he makes a bad move is the worst guy.
It's terrible. And then the worst kind of guy to play against, you knew what I was going to say here. It's just a big guy that smells. I'm not throwing shade at you. You don't smell. I respect the way you play the game of basketball. I actually really enjoy it because it's a good workout for me. I can't stand I would hate playing against
big guys that smell, like it just actually reminds. So the thing with defense when you're a big is you actually don't want to lean on somebody. I was explaining this to Austin Gale, who played with us today. You don't lean on a guy because with somebody who's got post moves, you want to know how to turn, right? And if I can't feel you, I don't know where to go. So if a guy stinks, I'm just going to play an extra foot behind him, and this guy's going to have to turn around and hit a smelly jumper in front of me. And if he can't,
that's fair. When we played 21 today, my whole goal was to shoot as quickly as possible. So I just sprinted to the 3-point line and shot, tired. So that people would get tired, and but also because 2s are worth a lot more than 1. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're aware of it's like twice as much. So it's very advantageous to shoot the 3. But I would hate playing against myself.
I was getting kind of tired, but luckily, like it was trust tree, so that if I was under the hoop during defense, no one was giving me crap. So,
okay, here's my story from the plane. So, I'm a sort of a clean freak. So I get on a plane and I have like antiseptic wipes, and I wipe down the seat, the headrest, and the arm rests, and the table. Now,
you got Ethan to react to that.
Now, you think this is crazy. Here's the story. I get on the plane. There is a woman with her child.
It's already over.
Child is wearing diapers. Child's diaper needs to be changed.
Child has sat in your spot already.
Woman puts the tray down, proceeds to change the diaper on the tray, takes the dirty diaper and then puts it in the pouch in front of her. So you may want to make fun of me for wiping down the seats that I sit in, but that is why I do that. I could not believe.
I feel like Jalen Richard.
This story. I could not believe this story. Then it was followed up with. They then did it again. There are 2 diapers stuffed in the pouch next to me. The woman's husband is playing music loudly on his phone.
Well, Jalen Richard would say, what did we do as a society before we had changing tables? And the answer
down to the dinner table.
We murdered the person next to us on the plane. More people died, just like vaccines.
So this person has great self-control. If this were me, I might need to be air-marshaled because, wow. So now you understand when I would do that.
On my way home from...
I don't want to get lice. I don't want to get off the airplane with lice and a cold.
No. On my way home to Minneapolis last week, the family sitting next to me had a daughter who sounded like a pterodactyl. Just like screaming in my ear the whole time. And so we're like an hour in, and the daughter throws her bottle at her mom's head. Mom avoids. Hits me, of course. Oh, sorry. You're sorry for that? Not that your daughter sounds like a reptile. Yeah.
That's
so on the airplane. That's
pretty bad.
Yeah, I'm just glad I wasn't flying to Vegas.
I'd also
I'd
need to be air-marshaled for that as well. Where do you fall on the put your seat back?
Oh, I mean, my thing is like I used to be the guy who would just stick the knee right in the back of somebody who would try. But I used to work on planes. I don't work on planes anymore. I just read books. So it doesn't really bother me. I don't put my own seat back, but I guess I have. I don't know. I've been convinced. Our friend Josh is pretty like a convincing guy. What about you? You don't work on things that move because you get sick.
I get sick. So I particularly hate it. Sometimes I have to work. And so I deal with feeling nauseous.
Yeah.
And nothing is worse than trying to deal with feeling nauseous, working, and having to then recline my seat to try and see my computer.
Yeah.
So I kind of hate it. I also just think it's not necessary. Like, I don't think it does anything for you. So I don't do it because personally I think it's a waste. And it's like, just fix your posture and sit there and figure it out and try not to kill anyone while this plane is like, I don't understand the benefit for the person. So I think it's a waste. And I just generally look down on people's intelligence for doing that because I think they're stupid.
I have never been able to sleep on an airplane, so
I can't either.
Yeah, so I wish I could, but I don't. I agree with you. I don't think the extra lean back would help me at all.
It wouldn't. It's a waste.
Yeah.
Just get first class.
I'm more of teach their own on it, except for only because I've decided to evolve away from working on planes. But
you're a higher being now.
Yeah.
All right. That was our show. We'll see you guys next week. Peace out.